3rd Battalion's commander, Lieutenant Colonel J.P. Wanya and family. And also thank you to Sergeant Major Tommy Blair and Ms. Jolene for attending. Today we're pleased to welcome Mr. Jack Kepley. He's a member of the 34th Infantry Regiment who served throughout the Pacific Theater in the Second World War. He came to us quite by chance. Mr. Kepley, after the war, continued serving his community, and as a scout master, he worked with First Sergeant Wilson, and that's how we got in touch with Mr. Jack Kepley. And so with that, we'll turn it over to First Sergeant Wilson, and we'll get started.
Well, thank you very much, and I do appreciate the opportunity you give me to come and talk to you. I was amazed at being asked to do it. There was Kim asked me, he'd heard me talk some about my experiences in World War II and some of the things that I'd told him. And he asked me, so were you with the 34th Infantry? And I absolutely was. I joined it before they went into combat and saw them through it, and was in occupation forces in Japan with the 34th Infantry. So I spent a lot of time with the 34th Infantry, and I thought I would tell you about my experiences, and if you have any questions or anything you'd like to ask me, that'd be fine. And in the middle of middle of March of 1944, we landed in Million Bay, which is on the southeast coast of New Guinea. And it was, they called this a orientation and assignment center. And we were taken by truck to an encampment among rows and rows of tents, and where we would receive the information and assignment. And it means the time that we kept, in the meantime, they kept us busy there, and unloading ships and stacking things. And that was the first opportunity I had to do something for the war effort. And so I felt good about that. In about a week, one evening late, we had about 200 of us to take our barracks bag and get in trucks. And we went to the beach and unloaded the barracks bags in LCMs, which is landing craft mechanized boats that had the big front that dropped down, where you could land on the beach. And they unloaded some cases of sea rations, which was meat and vegetables, and said that we would be there during the night. They were going to leave early in the morning. And so we unloaded our barracks bag and got in there ready to go. Well, it was a rough night. It rained, and at dawn we moved out. We noticed the wind had picked up, and with the clouds on the horizon, and they were having a monsoon, which was a tropical storm. And I saw 3 twisters on the horizon at one time, and we were slashed around the bottom of that boat, and I got so seasick that I climbed up on the ramp and stood up there and let the ocean beat me in the face and keep me from dying, I guess. Well, we finally landed, and we were taking some trucks to from the landing boards. It was getting dark, and our trucks had small lights on them, blackout lights, and they told us that they had an air raid signal. And usually it was only one plane, and they call him Bed Check Charlie because he flew one time at night and dropped a bomb here and there, and it sort of kept you out of bed. Well, we finally stopped and got out of the truck and was greeted by a first sergeant who checked our names and with the list, and he told us that we were assigned to the anti-tank company of the 34th Infantry. And this was good news because I took anti-tank company training in my basic training. And the first sergeant asked us, did we have jungle hammocks? And we did have jungle hammocks, but they were packed up in bags, and they told us not to take them out of the bags if we couldn't get them back in the bag, and we'd have trouble with them. So we said, well, yeah, and he said, well, unload them and connect them with these two posts out here. They put some posts in that they were going to have a dining hall there. And so I tied slipped the jungle hammocks to the post, and it had a cover, and it dropped down, and the zipper to zip it up and get inside of it. And I finally managed to get in there and be pretty comfortable, and I went to sleep, and it started filling up with water. So I didn't know what to do. I just had a knife in my belt, so I took a knife out and put a hole in the bottom and let the water run out and went back to sleep. And being awakened in the morning by an activity in the kitchen, I rolled out of the jungle hammock, and my fatigues were wet, and but it was not cold, and so we just waited a while, and I noticed that they were getting ready for breakfast. Unfortunately, we had that morning was breakfast was a pleasantly surprised to see that we were being served with pancakes, syrup, butter, leek sausage, and coffee. And this was the best breakfast I'd had in a long time. After breakfast, the first sergeant assembled all of us and all the replacements, and he told us that he was going to assign us to our squads. And this was the first, but first he wanted to introduce us to the company commander, Captain Whale. He welcomed us and gave us a brief history of the 24th Division. It was known by that code, the Victory Division, and the slogan was, "First to fight." This was because that they were at Schofield Barracks in Hawaii when the Japs struck Pearl Harbor, and the soldiers had to break into the supply room to get ammunition to shoot at the Japanese. And they had recently arrived at Goodenough Island. They had been down in Australia and protected Australia from the Japs, but they were moved up to Goodenough Island. first sergeant then assigned us to squads. I was assigned to the first squad, second platoon, and I followed the sergeant to a tent. He introduced himself, and he was Bill Hanna. And he showed me a cot where I was placed my duffel bag. An anti-tank squad contains 5 men. The number of the crew of a 37 millimeter anti-tank gun, plus a driver. And the assistant squad leader come up to me, and his was Skip McCormick. And Skip asked me, said, "Have you finished high school?" I said, "Yes." I said, "Well, how old are you?" I said, 20 years old. They said, "Well, you don't look like it. You look like a kid." And I didn't like that at all. But that word, it stuck. I was the kid. From then on, I was the kid. Everything, I was the kid. You know, well, we had names for everybody. The first sergeant was Grandmother Hall, because he was an older man, and he treated us like a grandmother. After about 2 months of training with this new company, the 34th Infantry, along with the 24th Division, got me ready for combat. We took our gear and went to the beach with LCVPs, which is Landing Craft Vehicle Personnel, and we're waiting to take us to an APA, which was an anti-tank truck, and which is a large ship that has complements of about 30 Higgins boats or LCVPs to unload. And we went aboard and were directed below deck to a larger room with rows of standard bunks, 4 or 5 high. Shoving our equipment, we made our way back to the top side to watch the activity in the bay. It took 5 or 6 days for us to get to our destination. During briefings on the way, we were told that we were to invade Hollandia, Dutch New Guinea, located on the location of a Japanese base halfway up the northern coast of New Guinea. Our mission was to be in reserve and to unload supplies and equipment on shore. Climbing down the cargo net, draped over the side of a ship, we got into an LCVP and went to the beach about an hour after the first wave. There was no fighting anywhere on the beach, and when we landed, and we could hear gunfire in the distance. We worked very hard all day stacking supplies, equipment, unloading folks. Around sundown, the company made a circle of perimeter for the company. Everyone called it a slit trench, but we made foxholes. Everybody called it slit trench, but there were foxholes, and there's a small one-man hole in the ground that this is covered for concealment. The next afternoon, we were relieved from our unloaded duties and hiked about a mile inland. And we were thinking my eyes were playing tricks on me for staring in the darkness. That was what we talked about. That night, we were on a bank of a dry stream bed, and we had been told that there was a lot of enemy there, And I first went to sleep, and my friend Skip McCormick was on guard duty, and he woke me up and said, "You better get a good firing position because I think we're being attacked." And I got up there ready to shoot. Well, didn't see anybody, and I thought, I looked at a bush, I thought I saw somebody move, but I couldn't tell. Fortunately, I didn't shoot. And the next morning, somebody else ceased fire. And come find out that we had a perimeter around the company headquarters. And there was no Japanese there. And they just started shooting. The company commander was so mad, and he started to march his company away, and somebody said, "You're going to walk off and not police up the dead?" And so he finally got us away and had everybody's rifle smelled to see who shot. They suffered for it. When we moved to a new location beside a clear stream near the beach, we set up a more permanent campsite. We had no tents, but I had a jungle hammock, and I erected it between two wooden boxes held by two pieces of wood nailed together to the sides. They made a good shelter. This area contained a lot of destroyed buildings, all kinds of supplies strewn around. This had been a Japanese Navy supply base. We saved everything we could use, and there was one letter written in Japanese, on Japanese stationery, that I saved, and I still have it. And we saved everything we could use there. And we discovered a number of wooden crates containing Japanese money. And apparently they were their paymaster depot or bank, figuring it'd be worthless if they had a whole lot of money. We destroyed all of it except a few dollars each one of us took. And so we could, trade it in. And when we got to Japan, they paid us in that same stuff. And it had victory stamped on it, though, when we used it in Japan. Our squad joined the others in the security duty they were performing. We were assigned a trailhead location and told to conduct 2 patrols each day for at least a mile in the jungles to discover any enemy activity. At first, the entire squad made a patrol every day, but then we found they just sent 2 men to be enough. And so one morning, Skip and I were returning to camp, and I saw a snake about 2-3 feet long, and I shot its head off and threw it down in the side of the bush there. I walked on down the trail, and when we got back to the base where we set up our camp, there were some sailors there, and they were looking for souvenirs. And they said, well, if you make it worth our while, we'll let you go on patrol with us, and you can see some Japanese shacks up there, some stuff you can find maybe. And they was happy to hear that. And so they started off with us up that trail, and I got within that 60, 70 yards of where the snake was. I whipped my carbine off and shot it from the hip I said, what is that? What is it? Oh, it's just nothing but a snake. And they said, where is it? And we said, it's up here. So we walked a long way, and there it was. Shot with the head. Well, it's gone off. And we unexpectedly got orders to move out. It was obvious that there was no advanced preparation. Leaving our 37 millimeter anti-tank guns, we were taken by truck to a waiting LST, a landing strip transport. And the LST has a long ship with doors on the bow that open up with a ramp that lowers to provide access for trucks and tanks to be driven into a large open area under the deck. The ship can be driven to the beach and directly unloaded. Vehicles into the land. Hundreds of them were used during the war. They crowded our entire regiment on several LSTs, and it was hard to find a place to sit down. There was a row of rooms on each side of the vehicle's deck for bunks, but we were far exceeded the number that were available. Obviously, we were making a short trip. Apparently, these were the only ships available. Once we got underway, it was announced that it was made that we were going to land in Biak off the northeast coast of New Guinea. The 41st Division had invaded the island and ran into more resistance than they expected, and the 34th Infantry was taking up the slack for helping them out. The greatest difficulty we encountered aboard the LST was the lack of toilet facilities. They simply were not enough for the number of men aboard. The responsible ship captain welded angle irons out over the water and put boards on them with holes in them, and they used them for obvious reasons. A rail was extended out behind the seats to keep the occupants from falling back into the ocean, and paper holders were provided. There was no modesty panels of any kind. Using this toilet over the side of the ship directly into the ocean was a different experience from any other that I remember on seaboards that I've taken. In Biak, the ship pulled up to a jetty with the bow doors open, and we marched out onto a long wooden pier going to the beach. Biak is a relatively small coastal island covered with jungle. The top is flat and ideal for constructing airfields. Runways over the coral. They had to be scraped off, and much of the island was honeycombed with caves and were ideal for defense of the island. This is why the 34th Division was having so much difficulty. We were assigned to take a defensive position along a ridge below the top of the island to stop the Japs from counterattacking. We dug in and held this position for the entire time we were at the island, perhaps a month. There was only a few attempts to infiltrate during the many long nights, and none of them were successful. There were a battery of 155 artillery along the beach, and they were continually shooting shells overhead. And Fred Stout, who was one of the Harlan County, Kentucky coal miner and a great trickster, he would follow the sound and said that one was red, and this one was blue. And we caught on to it, we started joining in them. But a lot of them couldn't figure out what was doing, and they thought it was their eyesight. They couldn't see these shells. Well, no one could see the shells being shot at them. Around the 1st of October, it was obvious that all the activity around us, that we were getting ready for a major operation. Our weapons carrier trucks were prepared to run under water and were tested in rivers. Ammunition cases of 30-centimeter anti-tank guns were packed in the truck along with other items that we needed for combat. Supplies and materials that were not needed were packed and delivered to their future destination by a rear echelon. Finally, the day came for us to pack our combat gear and move out. Our 37-millimeter anti-tank guns and trucks were put on APAs and attack transport ships, and we were boarded the next day. The Bay of Hollandia was full of ships being loaded. The next day, the convoy began to move out into the ocean. I've never seen such a collection of ships. As far as one could see, in every direction were ships of all kinds. Later it was reported that there were 500 ships in that convoy. And we were told we were going to Leyte in the Philippines. It took us 5 days to get there. They passed out material about the Philippines and its people, and we were given brief information that we could expect. We also had church services, and I remember one evening in sundown, we had a hymn sing on the deck of the ship that included hundreds of men aboard. We all got the feeling that the event to take place was of historical importance. Around 3 a.m. in the morning of October the 20th, 1944, we got a wake-up call, and everyone was served a big breakfast. The LCVP boat numbers were marked on their steel helmets, and we lined up on deck with the gear. We could see the large guns of battleships and cruisers blasting the shoreline. Airplanes were dropping bombs on the beach. From all the explosion on the beach, it was hard to believe that anyone could survive that assault. We went down to the side of a cargo net into a landing boat, and all the boats circled in groups on the seaward side of the ship. Time came for the first wave to head to the beach, and the group landed and moved toward the shore. We were in the third wave. Our 37-millimeter anti-tank guns were on another ship, and we picked them up later. The mood in the boys was grim and was serious, as it portrayed some of the movies I've seen. We joked and kidded around, I believe, to hide our apprehension. I remember Ken Sloan taking his big cigar and lighting it up. It took 15-20 minutes to get to the beach. When the LCVPs grounded and dropped their ramp, we heard gunfire and see first and second wave huddle behind a bank next to a row of palm trees beyond the sand on the beach. We all made a dash and joined them on the ground, trying to find an open place between bodies. Everyone was shooting at the wall of trees and bushes 50 yards or so beyond the palm trees, and I saw a destroyed bunker that seemed to be unoccupied. Finally, Colonel Red Newman, our regimental commander, shouted, "Get the hell off the beaches." He led a charge inland, and everyone got up and started running towards the gunfire that had them pinned down. We overran the Jap positions, killing everyone. was in a small house that was built next to a kitchen, shelter, and the mess hall. The quartermaster tent was erected and set up, and our squad tents were in rows inside, fastened to the pole lashed to the post of the tent. We were about 200 yards from the beach, and we went swimming almost every day. We always swam in the nude, and there was no difficulty. Even though there was some Filipino ladies around, they would come down to the beach and wash our clothes and place them on the rocks and let them dry while we were swimming. We got a stack of letters, and I got a newspaper from the Salisbury Post on Tuesday, August the 2nd, 1945 edition that had an article about me and my pictures with headlines that read, "Salisbury loses pictures, find them later on a dead Jap." The article did not follow facts, but it made a good story, the way it wrote. Actually, I had some pictures that I was carrying in a rubberized packet to keep them dry. I believe I dropped the packet the day I pulled the poncho out of my light pack to cover Larry, some weeks later, the envelopes were delivered to our company CP and had a note that were taken out from the pack of a Jap that was killed by elements of our division about 30 miles from where we were. My name and address is on the envelope of the packet. A reporter hearing of this looked me up and got the story. He asked me to name my hometown newspaper, and finding out that it was Salisbury Post, he said he would wire an article to them. I really didn't believe him, but I almost forgot about it. Of course, I wrote about how the story actually happened. I guess that's about as much of stuff that I've told you. I know it was hard to understand, but it went on and on for all those 254 days I was with the 34th Infantry as they were in combat. And it had a real effect on my life. For one thing, I learned about leadership and responsibilities. And I learned from my sergeant and my corporal how to guide people and direct people. And I learned a lot about doing my duty. And I used that material later in life, because I was in the Boy Scouts when I joined at 12 years old, and this never did get out. And this is my 86th year with them. And we've had 145 Eagle Scouts, and this is number 75. And it's been a wonderful life, and I'm just glad that I can get up and do things like I can. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. If you've got any questions,
Mr. Kepley, sir, I know I just met you this morning. I've had a little bit of time to review articles about your life, stories from your hometown provided by First Sergeant Wilson. A very remarkable life.
Well,
really is,
thank you
sir.
very much.
You know, American culture will look at Mr. Kepley's generation, and it's called the greatest generation for a reason. It's my grandfather's generation. And I know many of you have had, you know, family members fight in the war. It wasn't just his service in World War II that captivated me in these stories. It's what he did after that. Going back home and continuing to give to his community. Starting an insurance business, working in the Boy Scouts over 80 years, producing future leaders of our country. Active member in the community, active leader into this day. Sir, I would just ask, is there anything you could offer the men and women of this unit responsible for transitioning civilians into soldiers? You know, majority of this population are drill sergeants. What is the biggest thing you could offer the drill sergeants to help them mold those young men and women to be as productive as the greatest generation?
Well, I don't know, but I think that probably the things that you learn as you move forward, as you is positioned in the Army, helps more than anything I know of, because it was the making of me, I'm sure. There was a story that I didn't finish, but it's talking about the kid. I was the kid to this, the kid to that. So one day, my sergeant came up and said, I believe there's a shorter way to get down to the river. That's where we went to get our water and got our baths and so forth. There's a shorter way down to the river, I do believe. So he said, come on, we'll find out. And I went down the trail with him, and we come upon a shack that was found a sleeping Japanese in the shack. And I looked at the sergeant, he looked at me, and we did not trust them. You couldn't do that because they would kill you. They would kill you if they could. So he did this, and I pulled the trigger of my Thompson submachine gun, and I think my trigger stuck or my finger stuck, and 30 rounds went through it. And the company heard all this shooting, and they set up a skirmish line real quick, and the sergeant went back and said, oh no, it's the kid, it's the kitty. He just sneaked up on the sleeping Jap and shot hell out of it. They said, our hero, killer, killer, killer. And they hauled me around, and the killer. Well, you know, that name stuck. From then on, I was Killer. And in 2002, the man called me up and said, do you know a guy named Lyle Wrinkle? I said, you mean Lyle Wrinkle of the 34th Infantry? He said, yeah. I said, where are you, Lyle? He said, I'm in Tallahassee, Florida. I said, how'd you get my name? He said, your phone number. I got off the internet. And I said, he said, I want to come see you. I said, do please. And so he came up with his son and his grandson, his son-in-law. And by golly, the first thing he said when he got out was, hello, killer. So you don't lose it. Is there anything else you'd like to hear? Yes?
Hi. Thank you. We are living through the start of a war in Ukraine, and sometimes looking back, we think of war as an inevitable. Do you remember December 7th, 1941, and did you have any feeling of inevitability before or since?
No. Give me that again, please.
December 7th, 1941, do you remember it, sir?
Oh, did he?
He was talking about the sense of inevitability of war, and whether after the attack on Pearl Harbor, did you have a sense that war was to come?
Well, I hope that war is not inevitable, but I certainly think that we need to be prepared for combat. And I appreciate what you're doing, because who knows what's going to happen. And you just got to be ready and hope for the best and prepare for the worst. Anything else? Yes, Alan?
I've heard this story before, but there is an iconic photo that probably everybody's seen of General Douglas MacArthur wading ashore.
Oh, yes.
Can you tell us the real story behind that
I
picture?
can tell you the story behind that, for sure. We landed in the Philippines on Leyte, and we were waiting on our anti-tank guns to be unloaded. So we didn't have anything to do except stand there on the beach and just wait. Well, I saw a landing barge come and drop the front, and they brought out some cameras and reflectors and all this stuff, and what in the world's going on? And then here's another landing barge come in there, and it didn't go to the beach and drop it like it could have. It stopped about 3 feet, 4 feet out, and so the men could step out into the water. And they dropped the ramp, and they stepped out and waited, and it was General MacArthur. And he came ashore, and he's looking around and at dead jabs, and talking to the men. And somebody had their rifle torn down and cleaning it up, and they said, "Get that out of the way! Get that out of the way!" And finally, he made a little talk, and they took his picture of that he had returned, and he got back on the boat and left. And, I have returned. So that's the story of I have returned.
Mr. Kepley, sir. Looks like we are rounds complete when it comes down to questions. But before we wrap up, Sergeant Major Blair and I, and on behalf of the entire 34th Infantry Regiment, both battalions would like to
Oh,
present
look
you
at there! Good gracious news!
no appreciation. Major Delaney spent probably a couple hours trying to assemble that for you, sir.
Look at that boat.
Just to say thank you for coming all this way. Make it so.
I've ridden in them.
I don't think they were that small when you rode in them, though, were they?
Small.
And Mr. Jack, from our team to you,
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
from our team to you, thank you for what you did.
Unfortunately, it wouldn't be complete without a challenge point.
Oh, my goodness.
Sure.
Oh, look at there. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for your service. One more time for Jack Kepler. If anyone wants to come on up and shake the hand of an American hero, come on up.
How old are you?
What's that? Yeah. Hold up. This is my wife, by the way. She's our IT specialist. Helped my email.